And for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilor Bill Boyd will not be present this evening. He's been excused. But I know he will watch this when he has time. Okay, Eileen, do you want an initial statement at all, or just that? We're doing library first.
Okay. As far as the library is concerned, you will see some of the things that we talked about before, which is increases in...
It's number 15, by the way. Right. Tab 15, sorry.
In health insurance, increases in retirement. I generally don't cut their budget anyway, but I am very in favor of making their part-time technology person into a full-time person. I know that,
yeah.
as you
can
know,
come on down.
As you know, they've been trying very hard to bring the library up to modern standards, and especially to attract the younger adults and children. And they've been having a terrible time trying to find somebody that would just work part-time. So anyway, that's my spiel for the library.
Thank you. Yvette, you want to say anything, Vance? Do you want to highlight anything, or?
Yeah, I think Rick's going to kick us off here.
All right. For those watching at home, I'm Rick Barnes. I'm the chair of the Library Trustees. Yvette Kauser, director of the library. Overall, just to kind of highlight, Yvette can get into the details of some of the lines that changed in the budget. The town manager budget versus the last year's budget is an overall drop. If I did my math right, $2,453. So we've actually seen a net decrease from last year. Just some of the highlights, and I'll let you get into the details. We did move one of the positions from the hourly into the supervisory position. And the one point that I just wanted to bring up that is my personal favorite in the, where is it? Library materials. We're adding a new service.
Do you have a number?
8450.
Yeah, 8450.
Thank you.
We are going to be adding a new service, which is why you see the increase on that line. It's the Hoopla service, which we had a chance to demo, and I'm super excited about this myself. And everybody I've talked to in town that I've shown it to, can't wait to actually see it and start using it. It's going to be a combination of music, videos, ebooks, graphic novels, and comic books for kids. It's a little bit of everything, and it's all digital service. And we only had a chance to demo it, so I haven't seen the full service yet. But I guess you can even download an app so it work with your smart TV and mobile devices and everything else. So that to me is my personal favorite of the changes in the budget. So, and then I'll pass it off to Yvette to get into more of the details.
Okay.
Is Yvette as excited?
Am I as excited?
About
I have the app on my phone.
We're all excited about it. I'm telling you. Yeah, we're all excited about it.
I'm a real stickler for that. So, no.
So you're all ready. Okay.
Well, to do the trial, just to finish off the idea on Hoopla, to do the trial for Hoopla, you had an opportunity to download the app, and so, even though the trial is technically over, I still have the app on my phone waiting for us to go live with it. But, that was a really neat, that was just a neat service, I think, in terms of looking at the offerings for graphic novels and comics, which, Rick and I both like these things.
Well, my kids are excited about The Walking Dead being one of the choices.
They had some really popular titles, and it wasn't just the mainstream Batman, Superman kind of things. There were other titles that are a little more off the beaten path, but still very popular for comic readers. So that was neat to be, I can get this now. I can read it right now instead of wait. So yeah, anyway, so just to kind of maybe clarify and unpack a little bit of what Rick said a little bit already, the move for the office manager, that was a move listing that position under 1804 and moving it up to 1803. That was more of an administrative housekeeping thing for the budget because this person is a supervisor and has been a supervisor. It's just, let's group them correctly with the other supervisors, and that was just something I asked Paul to do. So there's no actual change. No. And then just to speak to the tech services position that Eileen mentioned, what we've had in the past is we have a technical services head who's a professional librarian, and then we used to have 2 part-time people in tech services, and in 2015 one person left the position. We never filled it. I reallocated 8 hours to the existing or the remaining tech services aide, and the previous department head who left, and then the new department head that we hired in the time since, they had both come to me and said, you know, we really need more hours in this department because that 20 hours that we lost, even though I pulled over 8, there's still remaining basically 16 hours of work that is not getting done as quickly as it had been getting done. You know, so if I have 2 different department heads, very different personalities, telling me something, I'm probably going to pay attention a little bit more than if it's just, I mean, I pay attention to everyone who says something. I don't mean it that way. I really listen carefully.
I knew that's what you meant.
I listen. Thank you. So, but yeah, if it's 2 different people observing the same amount of work, and coming in with a different set of eyes, yeah, then I'm going to really look at this a little more carefully and go, well, maybe it's time to make this position full-time and I can get more out of them. The reason why it's adding, you know, increasing it to full-time instead of just re-adding, you know, or adding again that part-time position is because of the technical skills. These are people who are cataloging our books, and so it's something like data entry. I guess I could equate it to something like data entry, or you know, I don't know, maybe like if you were thinking of maybe the police department and dispatch and someone operating that particular thing, not knowing anything about the police department really, but you know, it's a technical service that, you know, you have to learn a certain system, and then it's just, you know, I think the challenge for us is once someone has that particular set of skills that are technical, where they have to go to workshops and classes and have training and be trained by you know, people in our consortium and their department head and so on and so forth. Then they have those skills and they can take them and go to another library and get paid more, or have a full-time position. So that's the concern. You know, the person we have is very good, great worker, pleasant to work with.
Think that person will go full-time?
Would love to keep them. I would love to keep them. You know, the head, maybe to say, you know, maybe anecdotally, the department head who left lived in town and is now commuting to Wyndham. So it's just where's the job for this particular skill, and of course it's something in demand, you know, in libraries. So
okay.
That's really the big add for us. I have talked to them. They are able, with their existing life and situation going on with outside of the library, they are able to take it on. And we'd be happy to have them.
So there's consistency. You don't have to retrain anyone. You have someone who's already.
Absolutely, yes. It's time. That's a lot of time and money just to retrain someone. I really don't think there's anything else here. You know, we're always trying to increase our materials line. We're always trying to look for digital services, you know, that people can access from home. Things on the state library level have changed. We have an Overdrive book service where they've just taken away the magazine section. So, you know, we're currently looking at Zenio to fill in that gap for magazines, and that's something we'll probably be able to add just in our current budget now, and then it would just continue. But that looks like a really good platform. But yeah, I mean, those, I don't know if you have any questions for me. It seemed like when we looked at the budget, there weren't a lot of.
No, there weren't much.
It's
Any
almost flat,
questions
so.
from any of the members of the council? Jackie?
Yes, Yvette,
Yeah.
you said you took away the library section?
Magazine.
Or magazine.
I didn't. I didn't.
Yeah.
That was the state library up in Concord has a consortium that any library in New Hampshire can join this consortium, and they do group purchases on certain things. One of the group purchases they do is Overdrive Books, which is ebooks and e-audio books that you can get on your phone. And they did a trial of magazines, and something changed with the Nook platform, and so now they have discontinued that services with the consortium. And now each individual library in the state has to decide, well, am I going to continue to offer that service to my population, and with what? We were looking at Zinio as a platform. It's offered by Recorded Books, very reputable company. We already work with them with Atomic Training. And at my consortium meeting last week, we were really starting to talk about Zinio. And then we're looking at it, just here in Merrimack, to see, we can just replace it. So that's what that is. But I didn't make the cut.
Thanks.
So, okay.
Any other questions? None. Oh, Tom.
Just for clarification, under other outside, no, not there. Where did it go?
Just looking at it.
It moved.
Okay.
You had snow removal in here and it was
Yeah.
blanked out. Is that the town taking that now, or?
The town plows our lot, but we have our custodial aide who is shoveling. So right now, we haven't had to outsource that piece of that, and the town also does the sidewalk along the DW, the public sidewalk. So,
Okay. Thanks.
I think the reason we had the line in there was because we were in between filling the
yeah,
maintenance person, so we
Yeah.
had to contract
Yeah.
with somebody to do it until we found a replacement maintenance person.
yeah,
Oh.
we did do that for a little bit, but now, right now, we have staff who are taking care of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, go ahead, Dan. Sure. I knew in your eyes. He didn't say yes, but I saw the look in
It's
his
for
eyes.
more for people at home, because we see the numbers, because we have our budget books and our computers and everything.
Right.
So I'm just
Go right ahead.
not ballparking, but some rough numbers so people at home know that the library department has approximately 22 employees, 9 of which are full-time, 13 part-time, and a budget of $1.1 million. So I just wanted people, so it's in the minutes, and then also people at home know
Yeah.
roughly what does it take to run our library.
Yeah.
That's what it takes. And I just wanted to say that it was a very good budget.
Good.
And so I fully support the way it was. I had really nothing else
Thank
to
you,
say.
Dan.
So
We're trying to improve every year
Well,
how we
That's-
figure
You guys
out
have always
how
done a
to
good
work.
job.
That's the
so
point
I
I was going to make. That
appreciate
I
everything.
have. There's been a change of not only things within the structure of the library, but there's also been a great attitudinal change. Honestly, and I think I need to compliment everybody, the trustees and the employees. I think the intention was always to give good service. That was never a
Yeah.
question, and they worked hard. But there was a resistance to moving into the 21st century with all the things that were involved in that. And I see that happening. And I'm wondering if there's been a response in relationship to that. Have you seen kids coming in using the technology now?
Oh,
The 3D printer.
printer's got a backlog of what, like,
Oh, I don't want to talk about the backlog. It's very well used.
But the
Everything has a
point
backlog,
is,
but-
it's bringing them in and exposing them not only just to the 3D
Yeah.
printer,
Yeah.
but other things.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just want to compliment you on
Thanks.
updating our library.
we've got school groups that come in and use it, look
I
at
have
the
no
seismograph.
doubt.
Yeah.
and,
Well, it's funny, we
sort of
had,
excited about that.
When we had the flood over the summer that I told you about, and so we had these vendors come in to assess cleaning the carpet, and the office manager was giving them a tour of the library, and they were like, "Well, we might be able to clean the whole building, and let's book us for another thing." And so they walked through the teen area that now has this graphic novel selection and this manga closet, and they were like, "Wow, you have comics in the library?" I mean, these were younger people. And our office manager starts in the spiel, "Yes, we do, but your library in your hometown probably does too." And then they walked past the 3D printer and they stopped. And they were like, "What is this?" And it was a great moment of this was a vendor coming in to look at the carpet, but really started to notice what was in the space and how cool it was and how updated it was. So it was a great
But I think that's my point. I think
I know,
the
it's
kids
cool.
are going to
Thank
be
you.
drawn in
Yeah.
by the 3D printer, but they're
Yeah.
also exposed to everything else.
Yeah.
Well, the
That's
technology we've been discussing, it's got me very excited.
Especially about the hoopla. I know. We
Yeah,
got that.
yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, well,
I'm
not
gonna have to
even what
look
we
into
have
it,
now,
just-
but the technology we've talked about getting in the future, you know. Wait
And
see,
just when you
can't
get
wait.
it, it will be outdated then, too.
Well,
Very good, thank you.
okay.
Okay, all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, next is assessing, tab number,
You got a question in the back?
oh, I'm sorry. Absolutely, please come up so we can identify yourself, sir. Like, we know who you are, but public. It's not, you have to push the button.
Push.
There you go.
Working? Okay.
You got it.
Pete Hinkle, 1 Pondview Drive in Merrimack. And I'd like to put a plug in for the library. I think they're doing a great job. There are some problems that I see coming in the long range. And so what I'm talking about is more like long-range planning or thinking. And really has to do with more space for the library. And I've been making extensive use of it, as I guess people do when they get old and retired, nothing else to do. But I've been using the library for doing a lot of research. And I'm finding several things that are happening. And I think there's still a need for the old technology. Not everything can be done on a computer. Good old-fashioned books are still very nice to have and be able to use. And I'm finding that the library in Merrimack, as probably everywhere it sounds like, is having to sort of limit its collection of books. I go to the library book sale, and I find some of the library books actually for sale there because they're having to trim back their collection to make room for new stuff. And a lot of what I'm looking at has to do with history and really the history of our country and our culture. And I'm sort of afraid we're losing the record of some of that. And I've seen other libraries doing the same thing. I have to say that the researcher, the reference department, does a really good job on trying to get books through the interlibrary loan. And I find some other things going on there. For example, there's a policy evidently in the state that if there's one book left in some library somewhere in the state, it's okay if the rest of the libraries get rid of their book or out of their collection. And so we're down to one book in a particular subject, particular author. It might get lost, might get stolen, library might burn down. And we're at the risk of losing some of these old books with a lot of really good information in them. I ran across one example of a book that I was looking for. The only copy left in the state was at Dartmouth. And when they went to get it, they were told, well, it's disappeared. And there's an example of what can happen. And I see other libraries doing that. I ordered a book from a book dealer in Oregon. When I got the book, I opened it up. Here was a sticker in the back of the book that said Mount Vernon Library. So that book went all the way across the country and back again. And libraries are really having to trim back. So it limits the collection that's available for libraries through the interlibrary loan. And so I think we're down to the solution of just having some old-fashioned books and the library needing some more room for them. And I think there are some creative ideas that could be used to expand the space available for books without having to get into building a new library and costing a lot of money for the taxpayers. There are some other ways I think that could be used to find storage space for books that could be accessed fairly easily by the library. So I'd like to just encourage you to think long range about some other ways of creating this space so the library can have an additional collection and keep the collection that it has. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to comment, but that's it. I'd like to thank you very much, Nancy, for giving me a chance to speak to you.
Welcome. The only suggestion I would make is to make sure that's brought up with the trustees.
Mhm.
I understand what you're saying, and yeah, we'd be open to any discussion,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it should be presented, and I think your point's well taken, and you
Right.
should bring it up with the trustees.
Well, I talked to Yvette a little bit about this, and I think she is thinking more long range too.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't the time to go into details, but I'd be glad to do that at some point.
Tom, did you want to say something? Tom,
Yeah,
you
did she tell you that they survey their use of books, and if they don't reach a certain threshold, they sometimes
Mhm.
call the collection, and
Yeah.
that's how it's one of the ways that they call the collection, the age of the book, and and how often it gets used and those
Yeah.
sorts of things.
Yeah, I understand that.
And then hopefully she's got some, other mechanism in there that takes into account some of the things that you're talking about.
Historical.
Well,
Jackie?
we've got an aging population, and I think we're going to have more people like me that like to go back to the old-fashioned
Put us
books.
in the shelf.
Be- Look into the library.
We take up too much room.
Okay.
Out with the old
Most of what we
Jackie.
got's up between our ears.
Jackie.
I'd like Yvette to come back up too, please. And I want to thank Pete because, tell you the truth, I've thought the same thing. And there was one book that I knew our library had a whole set of their particular art books that are, aging now, but they're still, of course, as current as yesterday. And somewhere they've gone. And so I have the incomplete set. I tried to get another one, and she couldn't find it anywhere in the state. So I know that is the case. I just wondered, do you keep track of it, like Pete said, about a particular book, like The History of New Hampshire, Volume 1?
Okay, so I haven't met Pete.
Yeah, we've spoken on the phone.
We just
should
spoke on
talk.
the phone, okay. So in terms of the historic books that we have our historic collection in the Lowell Room, behind locked doors, glass doors, so they can be requested by, you can go to the reference desk and ask a librarian to unlock the book and unlock the case and have you look at it in the building. We don't allow those to circulate. The oversized of the historic collection are in my office because they don't fit on the shelves in the Lowell Room. And we couldn't construct any additional shelves in that room. So in terms of the historic books that we have in the collection, I have never weeded them in my time as the director since 2012. So anything that's been, given to the library or purchased that has particular significance to Merrimack or New Hampshire or the surrounding towns in Merrimack, it's still in the library. I know from what Pete described as some of the items that he is requesting, they seem to be coming from academic libraries, and an academic library is going to have a very different collection mission versus a public library. So that's one thing that, we probably would not have an academic section unless the town wanted us to, and then I'd have to figure out a place to put them. It's really just, we go with the demand of what does the town want this library to be.
So is it possible that book might never have been in our library?
It may not have, but I don't know the actual list of
Right,
books.
exactly.
And we can talk about this more, and we can talk to the trustees and stuff like that. But when I look at the floor plan of the adult materials, the concern I have is the very top shelf and the very bottom shelf. Most people can't get down on their hands and knees to get a book off the bottom shelf. Very different in children's services, where you might have younger parents, younger people moving around, and the problem is, getting up off our knees, it's a little tough now, and then also reaching the very, very highest. If you go into the library, and I include myself, Mr. Rothaus, I include myself in this group, so, but, the very, very top shelf, people mostly won't want to step on a step stool to reach it. I'm 5'6", that's pretty average height for a woman, and I probably wouldn't think twice because I'm a librarian and I'm up and down in the stacks a lot, but for a average resident, they're probably not on a step stool like that or down on the ground or things like that. So that's something I look at when I look at the floor plan in our current configuration. If our patrons want to have seating, like soft seating and places to gather, and we create those spaces, then something has to move because it's displaced. Where our stacks are right now in the adult area, nonfiction and the fiction and the new stuff, those are really tall shelves. I mean, they're beyond ridiculous tall. They were designed that way. That was fine. Do people use the library that way nowadays? It's maybe it's a difference between an architecture designing a space versus a librarian saying, how are people going to reach that shelf? I mean, that's different. I've worked in other libraries in Indiana when I was working there. The architects redesigned the entire children's area and made this beautiful playscape of a volcano and a stream with rocks and a bridge, and they all thought, this is lovely. The children will sit on these fake rocks and read with their parents and grandparents. Heck no. They ran all over this place, and they were climbing things, and it was just how people are actually, kids are going to look at a space and go, wow, but a grown-up is going to look at it and go, children will sit no, children will not sit quietly in this. We're inviting them to run around the library and climb things. So, I think, we when we look at a different space for the library, or, and I just want to say different. I don't want to say new building or renovation, because I don't know what that means yet. Our staff, what I've told the staff is, let's look at the space, let's look at what we can't do, what we're struggling with in terms of service to people. Are these books on the very top shelf going out, or are they not going out? When we run a collection report, and we do that regularly, then we'll run a report, we'll set parameters for it. If it hasn't circulated in 3 years, then we look at it, and we look at it very carefully. And sometimes we won't weed that item, just to give it another opportunity. We'll put bookmarks in it that say staff pick. Even if it's not really popular, we'll kind of, staff pick, just see, go. Is it gonna go? And sometimes they don't go, So it's kind of like we love these books too, so we really want to give everyone an opportunity to grab this thing before it really goes to book heaven and is enjoying its second life in someone's personal collection. But I don't want to know where the books go. They go to book heaven, and they all live long, long, happy, happy lives. But I don't want to know where they go. There is a book sale this weekend coming, if you want to.
What a segue that is.
I know, thank you. So you can go and rescue these withdrawn books from the library on Saturday and Sunday. But yeah, so when we look at it, we're very, very careful when we look at an item to see, is this still of value? And, I know there's sentimental value to some items, and there's historical value, which we just don't touch. But usually what we're touching is the popular materials and making space for the new popular materials that people do want to get. Sometimes things are damaged, and we really can't circulate that. It doesn't represent the library well or the town well if we are circulating an item that is heavily damaged, but maybe for sentimental reasons it's still on the shelf. I don't want to do that either. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jackie. But
It really did.
Okay.
And I was very excited about the idea of, in New York, in the New York Public Library, we just went down for really R&R, but we did go into the library. They have, the Bryant Park is next to it, and it all underground, a whole block and the library has all that hollowed out, and as for book storage. And I know books are so heavy that you do need a space like that. I'm very excited about the idea of us finding a book that the ordinary citizens wouldn't go in, but New York Library has a I can't remember what they call it, but like on call, and you have to go in and know what you want and order it, and it will be brought to you. And I don't think that's unique
yeah, no, we've
for
done
those
that.
just for that kind of a collection.
Yeah, I know before I came to work in Merrimack, some of the collection used to be stored at the O'Leary Center in the storage unit underneath. What I'm seeing with even, children's series, we've got 5 different titles. So let's say 3 shelves worth of books in our basement in periodical storage in the building. And these are not circulating and they're not being requested because, you have to kind of see if your patron population, are they browsers or are they requesters? Kids, they're going to look, they're going to grab, people come in with a specific idea and they are going to request that and someone will go retrieve it for them. But, there's also this mix of browsers too, and you want to have a certain amount of shelf space for that as well. So, I think something with an off-site storage, I would be concerned about staff time retrieving it. If we had a second location that's duplicating all of the utilities that Paul puts in the budget, I don't think we want to go in that direction. That doesn't make sense. I think, we'll have some meetings on our end with the trustees once the staff can really pinpoint and articulate to me, this is what I'm struggling with. or this is where there's a safety issue or anything like that. And then we can present it to the trustees in regular English, not library language, but, here's what we need, it looks like this,
Yvette mentioned the historic collection, and that's something that I'm really interested in. And I've had to go up to the library in Bedford sometimes to use their historic collection. So I know I may be talking about the Cadillac of libraries, but they have the space there to have a separate room just for their historic collection. And if you want to go use it, they go unlock the door, you go in. There's a big table there to sit at. All the books are available right on the bookshelf. You can browse through them. And I was able to find things that I didn't even know existed because I could look through everything they had in the collection. So that's the kind of thing that could be done with a little bit more room if the library had some space for it.
Well, I'm going to answer that. We do have that in the Lowell room.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's our historic collection.
Yeah, but you say there are other things that you have.
I have oversized books that are in my office that I can't bring out
Yeah.
and safely secure behind glass
Yeah.
right now. But, one thing that Pete and I talked about that maybe the public doesn't know that we have probably every copy of whatever, any variation of newspaper, local newspaper that was published in Merrimack, kind of ever. And those are in the basement. They're not itemized or cataloged or anything. They're just in Princeton boxes on a shelf. So not the best place for them. I've talked to a couple of people about how can I digitize these, how can we get them cataloged, definitely that level of historic room, adding in newspapers or any kind of artifacts. Let's say we have a partnership with the Historic Society. Never talked to them, don't know, I'm probably offending them. But let's say we have a partnership with them and they want to have objects in a shared space. Fine, but we don't have it in this space right now. And I can't put these newspapers anywhere so that someone can come in with their white gloves and look at them like an academic library where you can do that with a document. We don't have that, but they're also not being stored in climate-controlled room, like in Portsmouth has a beautiful historic. I think we have a beautiful historic room in the Lowell room. I'm going to say that. And we have the glass locked cabinets. These things are secure. They're secure in my office. My office is locked. So, but it's just the level of when you want to go in and look at it in a different way. Yeah, we don't have that.
But I think you've addressed it generally by saying you have to address the needs and wants of Merrimack.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Okay,
that's
thanks very
Yeah,
much, and
so-
now you have
Thank you very
things to
much.
get on too.
no problem. Thank you, Yvette. All
Thank
set.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, now we'll move on to assessing, tab number 2. Eileen, do you want to say anything aside from all the other stuff?
Yeah. This budget is pretty much just flatlined, and it is
Not a good choice for Eileen.
not to a nurse, but anyway, the health insurance and the increase in retirement are kind of offset by the 53rd week of payroll going away. But other than that, it's really pretty much the same.
Eileen, you want
Hello.
to say anything as well?
We've tried diligently every year, year after year, to try to keep it that way, flatlined. And I think we're actually down a little bit from where we were in 15-16 if you look historically at it. So there's not much to add. It's every year we're trying to squeak a little bit out of it to keep it as level as possible. And but there was very few changes, I think, overall from last year's budget to our proposed budget now. So no, I don't have a lot to add. For the record, I'll just state I'm Lauren Martin. I'm your assessor. There is 3 full-time staff in the town assessing department, and they've been with the town since roughly 1999-2000. So all 3 full-time staff members have been town employees for quite some time. So they like their job, and they're working diligently in the assessing office.
Okay, questions? Seeing none.
I say there's never any changes on ours. It's always like Nothing really.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet, exactly.
Thank you
And
very
one of the
much.
ways you're keeping it that way is the capital reserve fund, right? That 15,000 is put in so that every 3 to 5 years or whatever,
Right,
we can do a
that-
reval.
I think that was probably, after the last update 5 years ago, we were trying to put that aside to level things so that, to meet our statutory requirements to update, we weren't having big spikes in one year and then the lulls in the other. It helped to level it out so that there's a more level manner to the budget.
That's a good thing to point out, Tom.
Okay,
I'm glad you
thank you.
thought of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all set.
That's it. Okay, great. Have a great night.
Thanks. Sure, easy for you to say.
Be careful going home.
That's true. Okay, next, code enforcement, number 6. Come on down, Chief Courier. Eileen, you probably want to introduce?
Nothing to say except what I've already said about the other budgets.
Okay. Do you have anything to say?
This budget was pretty much flat line. It's a reduction from last year. There is one major purchase that we're requesting this year. That's in line item 8504. And that is the replacement of a large format color printer copy machine that we have. The one that we have at the station currently, it's used by both building health, or all building health and fire department, and it's probably, I want to say, about 10 or 11 years old. It's a HP. We can't get any parts for it. They won't service it anymore. So we're at that point. What we use that for is we provide copies to the public, and we also are in the process of scanning our color copies of our prints in. The fire marshal and the building inspector, both when they review plans, they review those in colors. A lot of the fire sprinkler plans are very intricate, and there's multiple colors that they use for highlighting problems and accepted things that have to be changed. And then we end up sending that whole document back to the manufacturer because we can't copy it or scan it at this point in time. We used to be able to do that, but we're trying to get this machine back up and operating so we can scan those, put them on disk, put them in our file, and we can decrease our file sizes so we don't have to expand that area. And again, use the service that we have been using for a while with that machine. That's really the only difference right now, or only major change in the budget. It's not cheap, though. That's the issue.
Yeah.
So I talked to some vendors out there, and they say they average between $85,000 and $15,000. So I'm kind of looking on the low
bells and
end.
whistles.
So if that is an acceptable change within the budget.
Questions? Finley and then Jackie.
In your endeavors to find a new printer, I don't know what's out there for printers, what you would look for, but try and steer away from HP for one buying cycle, because when they do that and don't support things, you can't get parts for it. It gets a little silly. And I know they all do it because we see it in here occasionally anyhow. But just my 2 cents.
I will do that.
Thanks.
Jackie?
This doesn't have too much to do with your budget. I want to thank you and all your people for the fine job that you do in protecting the people of Merrimack. It's really very, very impressive. I think I've asked this question before. I'll probably ask it next year. How come there has to be a fire truck that goes with the illness calls?
Jackie, why don't we wait until we do the fire department? Because this is code.
We're going to cover that in our next presentation.
Great.
I'll answer your question
in fact,
100%.
I believe you.
I'll remind you too. Tom?
Thanks. Chief, I mean, I don't have any problem with the color copier, and I understand the need for it. What's the maintenance cost on that? What is the material cost to run that annually? Is that somewhere else in your budget here? Or what?
That is not. At this point in time, we hadn't had much. It's in the building department under its, I think we have between maintenance and there's about $1,500, and that takes care of the copier we have and would take care of this unit we have also.
Okay.
Would that increase? I don't know what the cartridges are going to cost for this machine, but for our use and stuff, where we print, but the biggest thing I'm looking for here is that color scanner for large platforms, so we can print to a stick or print to a CD that we can put in the files to decrease the file sizes.
Okay. It frustrates me how much they charge for materials
Yep.
for these printers. They might as well give the printers away. They get so much for the materials.
Yep.
And so if
Sometimes
you're
they
paying
do.
9,000 for it, just make
Everything
sure
should
that
be free from
you're
that
not
point
trading
forward.
off, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
free materials or trading, you know, whatever. Just make sure you're getting an overall package good deal and not
Yep,
just.
we will do that. Put it
thank
out
you.
for bid and make sure we get the.
When we go out
best.
to bid, we'll definitely.
Yep. Paul has brought this up already a couple
with
times
everything,
about
we
cost.
try to wrap
So-
all that stuff in.
Sharpen your knives.
Yep, we try to get an agreement where they'll give us all the consumables, except paper, as part of the service agreements.
Okay, any other questions about code enforcement? Okay, let's move on then to fire. Now the rest of the crew's gonna come up. Tab 3. Well, you brought reinforcements, didn't you, huh?
Yeah, I got a good crew here. As Jackie did indicate, we have good people, and I just want to highlight that again, that we do have really good, competent people in the fire department. Awesome, all the time.
Now, do we do fire protection at the same time, or is that different?
Different.
Okay. Ooh, see, I have a little hand up. Hydrant.
Right, it's a hydrant service for Manchester Street that Pennachuck services, and we get a bill quarterly or monthly on them, and it hasn't increased.
We'll
And
do that before
We
we
can
do
do
the
that.
revenues.
yeah, we can do
Just
that.
to be able to
then.
make sure it's covered.
Yep.
Okay, Eileen, do you want to introduce?
Yes, please. What I want to say is that we have spent a great deal of time, all of us, the three chiefs, various people of his staff, Tom Boland, Paul, myself, Sharon Maronich, on looking at the personnel, which is for all intents and purposes, one of the biggest single expenses that we have placed into the budget. And for that reason, we look at it very carefully, and we intuitively, I think everybody realizes that we don't have necessarily enough staff to provide continuous coverage to the town. And you've all seen the big spreadsheets that we've shown where there's multiple calls and there's back-to-back calls and that kind of thing. But there are other reasons that we have kind of gleaned from doing a lot of research and gathering together data for a long period of time. So what I wanted to say is none of us in this process have taken this expense lightly. And the presentation that you see is genuinely a collaboration of minds put together and interpreting data and trying to make it as concise as possible. So other than that, the budget is fairly even, except for those things that we always talk about each one. But tonight, the chief is going to spend a good deal of his time on talking about the additional personnel. And just one other thing, it had been my intention to add the four additional firefighters, which represents one position per shift, into the whole year. But because of other expenses that we had, like increases overall in retirement that were significant, and some other things that that made the budget. There were various increases that occurred that, when looked at in their totality, we decided, and the fire department, the fire chief and his staff concurred that we could, half a year would be more manageable meaning we start in January rather than in July, which is when our budget year starts.
So a year from now.
A year from now. What? Oh, the other thing that I wanted to say is that during this process, we have taken a look at overtime, but we haven't looked at it. I'd like to look at things from several different angles. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go from what has been requested and go backwards, and then I like to come the other way and go forward to see to make sure that the numbers are accurate and as frugal as need be. So I don't feel necessarily that we've spent so much time on this that I don't feel necessarily that we have done adequate preparation to talk about the overtime, but on Monday we will, with an eye toward trying to reduce it some more.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, we're all ears.
Okay, to start out, we're going to do the operating budget first, then we'll go into the personnel things.
Okay.
As Eileen indicated, most of the budget is pretty straightforward. There have been some changes and adds under 8203. We added line item 3, 4, and 5, which is the auto pulse bands, EZI needles, and the CPR AED supplies. And that comes up to almost $9,000. What we're looking at there is that when we first got the auto pulse EZO and the CPR device supplies that we had, Assistant Chief Pearson, through his frugalness and talk about sharp knives, was able to put into our bid free supplies for 2 years. So we were able to, I call it nagging, but his work, get free supplies for those devices for up to 2 years when we first originally purchased those. Nice. That has run out. Okay, so now we're putting them back into the budget, and that's where that change is. Just the next item down, uniforms, PPE. We've added PPE for the new firefighters, if we add those into the budget. Personal protective equipment, firefighter protective gear, which come up to be the structural fire gear, helmets, masks, flashlight, boots, gloves, that type of stuff.
For the proposed 4 new firefighters, is
correct.
That correct? Yes.
For the proposed new firefighters. Moving along, there's not a lot of changes. I just want to make sure I hit the big ones. And hopefully answer any questions that may arise. If you go into 8406, emergency management, we've added under replacement, under line item 4, 5, and 6, we have replacement adapters for what they call CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear air breathing protections. We've had these units in-house for almost 18 years now. They have a 10-year, 12-year lifespan on them. We are able to contact the manufacturer, and because of our storage methods and how we use those, and the ones that we have not used, we're able to extend those again. So again, that was from that 10-year time to where we are now. And at that point in time, the manufacturer will not extend those lives for those anymore, and so we just have to replace them. And the last piece that we're looking at is under operating equipment is 8508. Is we're looking at purchasing a new hazardous materials extractor for cleaning of personal protective equipment. One of the leading causes of firefighter hazards is cancer, and part of our standard operating guidelines is to ensure that after every fire or any type of exposure to a chemical or biological, being blood, the equipment is washed, and we can do that daily. Currently, the one we have is 20 years old, and it does basically one set of gear, and it's starting to show signs of problems. So this new one here is it's a certified extractor, and we are looking at replacing that item itself, and that'll take care of half a shift. So 2 loads, we can do a whole shift instead of over a period of a week. We're losing our PPE that's stored. And that's it for the regular budget, if there's any questions on that.
Okay, Jackie, you had a question.
Why do you take, not so much the personnel, I can understand that on a sick call, but the fire truck?
Can I explain that when I do the next presentation? It'll be right in there. I'll show you that exactly when we do the
Oh,
personnel.
I'm sorry, I thought
Yep.
this was the...
Well, this is the right place, but what he's saying is,
Yep.
it'll be integrated, the answer will be integrated.
Integrated into the next presentation on personnel and tell you why we need so many personnel to do what we do. I will jump on that one really quick.
Other questions about the budget not related to the positions? I know I'm going to flub the name up. Remember the packs that we had the grant about?
Yes, self-contained breathing apparatus, no you. That's underwater. They were delivered
I
today.
was going to ask, what's the status of those? They were delivered today.
Yep. So
many
training
did we
starts next
get?
week.
So if there are additional personnel, we're going to,
It goes by riding position on the apparatus.
got to go to a mic, even though you're talking loud. It's
It
not-
goes by riding position on the apparatus, so that staffing level, it's dictated in NFPA by the riding position of the apparatus we have. That actually doesn't change our number of SCBAs.
Okay. Excellent. So they came in today?
Yes.
Yep.
Timing is everything. Okay. So no questions. Okay, so why don't you go right ahead and do your presentations?
Okay, moving along to the presentation. Figure out Paul's machine here. Okay, why do we need 4 firefighters? Kind of as an opening aspect, we've been spending a lot of time and going multiple calls. We've put together a lot of information and data collection for the town council and the town manager and verification of what we do and how we do it and how we document the information and double check this information. And we found this information to be very, very accurate. And I feel this information, in my professional opinion, is probably top notch. It's some of the good information that we have out there. So why do we need 4 firefighters? Too many back-to-back and multiple calls leaving the town inadequately protected too often. Okay, we see that through our chart and gathering data. 23% increase in calls overall since 2010. And why do we use 2010? I'm using 2010 because that's when the last time we had 9 firefighters on duty. In 2011, we dropped to 8, and then between 11, 12, and 13 and 14, we had a period where we were dealing with overtime and trying to make budget numbers, and we had to sometimes drop more than that to make those numbers. And now we're back up in 2016 where it was great to have the council realize that we need, and I don't want to use the term minimum staffing, but when we use the staffing of 8, that was very important to us because we're able now to plan how we respond to calls when you know what you have for minimum staffing on a shift.
Quick question, how long in 2010, whatever the staffing was, how long had that level of staffing existed prior to that? Do you have any idea? You may not know.
1999, we put yep.
So from 99 to 2010, you were at that level.
Yep.
And prior to 99,
We were at 8. Yes, because we put on.
which is what it is
Correct.
now. So from 99 to 2010, you were at 9.
So what we've done is
Thank you.
try to take those numbers from 2010 where we were to where we are and kind of compare the calls that we had in that time frame, because we can go back farther, but it'll kind of skew the data or it won't make sense. So we had to set that off from 2010 to where we are currently. 36% increase in advanced life support calls where 5 responders are needed versus basic life support calls where 2 responders are needed. So what that means is when you have an advanced life support call, that's very heart attack, major life-threatening call, trauma, motor vehicle accident. You need to have an ambulance that has 2 people on board,
That's
and
your
then you
answer,
have an
right?
engine that has 3 people on board. So when an ambulance goes to an advanced life support call, an engine has to go with them, because if you have to do CPR or have to work on the patient, somebody still has to drive the ambulance. The paramedic is in back with the ambulance. They take a guy off the engine. He goes in the back with the ambulance to do CPR or continue advanced life care. And then a lot of times they take another guy, so it puts 4 people on the ambulance to help monitor vital signs while the paramedic is doing his magic with all the stuff that he does. So that's why we send an engine with an ambulance on advanced life care, because we just need the personnel to save that person's life.
Does that answer your question?
No.
No.
Why the engine?
Because that's where the people are staffed,
It's
so
not the engine, it's the people.
it's
on
the people
engine.
on the engine.
I understand that. I guess I'm still curious about
Okay,
why
so-
they can't ride in something else.
Oh, it's,
Well, I can explain that also.
why can't they use a
If-
car instead of
let's-
an engine?
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right, and
that's
I understand
a
what you're
truck.
saying.
That's the question.
We go to a advanced life support call out by the lake. It's a 10-minute ride. The engine and the ambulance get there. They get on the scene. They're able to stabilize the patient. And at that point in time, we only need 2 people on the ambulance. We don't need the 5 or the 4 because they were able to stabilize the patient. Now what happens when they get back on that engine, they're in service right away. They can go from there to another call, another fire or another med call.
Oh, perfectly understandable.
Okay, instead of driving all the way back to the station to get the engine.
Yeah.
That's their toolbox. That's what they bring with them. There's EMS supplies on the engine.
Yeah.
There's stuff for fire protection, hazardous materials, motor vehicle accident. There's rescue tools on the engine. So they could leave that call and start driving back and have a motor vehicle accident 2 blocks from where they are. They're close. They can
Yeah.
render aid right away.
That's their traveling office.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That answers your question.
Yes, it does.
I just wanted to highlight it because it seemed like the appropriate time.
Yeah. And again, we're looking at basic life support calls. One of the things we have to understand is that though we try to put 2 people on a basic life support calls, sometimes that is not necessarily the case. We have BLS calls that have to do with sometimes obese patients where 2 people cannot lift them. We have some homes that are very small and steep staircases, and they're upstairs. Sometimes we have to send an engine because 2 people just can't get that patient down the stairs effectively without injuring them more or injuring a firefighter's back in that case. So you're going to see sometimes ALS calls where an engine ambulance goes. Then you're going to see sometimes where there's a BLS call and the engine ambulance goes just because they need the manpower to move the patient. But again, that goes back to what I said earlier. Once they're done, they're in service right away. They can go to the next call. Okay, significant increase in mutual aid, 2016 alone, and I'll highlight all this stuff later on in the presentation. In 2016, we gave 29 mutual aid assistance, and we received 90. So we're receiving a lot more than we're giving. Sizable workman's comp claims in 2015 and 16. The new
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Okay. What that indicates when you start seeing a trend toward more received contributions from other communities, they are basically augmenting our staffing because that's an indication that we don't necessarily have enough staff.
And I'll get into that when we show
Excuse
the
me,
chart.
and that's not what it's made for.
That's correct. And the future development that we're looking at, housing units that are projected to be built or currently being built is about 234. Apartment units, we're looking into the future, about 680. I had that broken down also. And then possible commercial industrial square footage is about 716,744. And then what we're really looking to is bring the staffing levels back to 2010.
So Chief, those numbers are projected, or are those numbers since 2010?
Those numbers are projected from here forward and just recently completed projects, not since 2010. I didn't go that far.
But it'd be pretty interesting to know how big the town is, how much the town has grown since 2010, since you're kind of using that as your
Yep.
benchmark.
You don't
And
even count.
I do believe Kyle
buildings.
Fox has a nice map that shows that. So it will probably
We do have a
be in the
map that
future.
shows that. It's unbelievable.
Yes.
Just to be able to, I mean, we opened it up. I have it down for the map. Just a 2-second.
Just looking
We
at
saw a
where
map.
we were and where we are today with the
We
red
saw
and the blue.
a map,
Yeah.
and it really was very visual.
Yeah.
It showed the houses that were, was it 73? 1973 in one color blue. And then it had the houses built in 73, and it's red.
Yep.
It's a very visual.
And if you take that visual and apply it to DPW for streets, or
All
apply
that.
it to the police,
All
apply it
town
to fire
services.
for more people that we're servicing, it's pretty significant.
It is amazing. Tom?
But I'm only interested in 2010 to 2017.
I understand that.
2073,
But-
or 1973, I understand, was a huge difference.
Yeah.
Oh, I understand, but it would be interesting to be able to say, I mean, with DPW, that's, yes, it would be interesting to be able to consolidate that map since 2000 and maybe 8. It would be much more reliable in terms of using it for this kind of thing. I agree with you. But I think it does highlight the growth in the town, and it would be interesting to look at staffing patterns that occurred then and what are they now, and it's proportional to the growth of the town.
Yep.
That's why I said it.
And I think that map that Kyle has, you can just query it through ArcGIS, and he can put, no matter what the
Certain
dates
dates.
are, those colors can change.
Right.
I just don't have that.
Did
Don't
you
have
want
that
to say
ability.
something, Eileen?
No, I was just going to ask the chief if it was fairly easy to do that so that we could bring it to the meeting on Monday.
I
Is
didn't
that
know, we'll have to
possible?
ask Kyle, because I don't have access to ArcGIS, so.
So Paul.
We'll
can-
give it a
have
try,
that.
Okay,
okay?
cool.
Yep. So one of the first things we want to discuss today is call activity, back-to-back and multiple calls. And in your packet, you were given 12 months of back-to-back and multiple calls. And what we're doing here is kind of just, instead of trying to sit here and go through all 12, we picked the first of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. And Assistant Chief Borneman is going to go through that chart and explain what it is and what it does and how we're using that chart.
Look at this. He already has it down. Oh, and even a little light even.
Thank you, sir. If I don't shoot myself
Yes,
in the
Eileen?
eye.
The charts are primarily for the public to be able to see on TV. You have them individually, and hopefully you can, they're not too small for you to be able to see them, but we can kind of pass them around afterwards if you would like. You also have all 12 months, and for brevity, we've just selected 3 months to show. And Brian may just do one, or he can ask you to pick one out of the hat.
So I believe from last year, you're all familiar with these. This representation here is 1 month. This one is January of 2016. At the top on the left-hand column, it starts at midnight and runs down to midnight again. And it's hard to see on you can see that like by date across the top. So depending on how many days are in the month, there's a number that corresponds with that. Each hour is blocked at 1 hour increments to kind of get an idea of what's going on. To make this a little more visual, on the side here, we've put in black from midnight to 6 a.m. and then it rolls over every night from 10 to midnight. So from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. the following day. That's the average person when they're sleeping. There's a couple of hours in the morning when you're getting ready to go to work, and there's some hours after an average job when you're getting home from work, preparing dinner, doing your kids' stuff and things like that. The more important thing, or the more, I don't want to say alarming, but concerns for us is the call volume. As you can see, and you have the benefit of the packet, you can pick a month. There is no rhyme or reason to when the calls happen. They happen
there's
whenever
no
they
pattern.
do happen, and then they happen again, or a few hours off. So single calls per hour is the light green, meaning that there was one single call in that hour, and we handled that with whatever it was. We didn't break down what the actual call was. Next to that, so you get an idea of what type of calls they are, is either light blue or a darker blue. So the light blue are ALS medical calls, and the darker blue is BLS medical calls. The yellow indicates
Brian?
Yep.
Basic life support and advanced life support.
advanced life support and basic life support.
Advanced life support requires 5
Yep.
firefighters
And basic life support, 2 firefighters. So the important part here is this yellow blocks. Anywhere you see yellow here, that means we had 2 calls in the same hours. They could have been advanced life support. They could have been basic life support. They could have been a fire call. It could have been a service call for a wire down. We didn't break that out, but it's tying up our resources. This yellow color is 3 overlapping calls in the same hour. Happened here, here, and over here. Now, this particular month, January 2016, we actually break down 4 overlapping calls in the same hour, but it does happen throughout the year, specifically July 2016, which you have, and December of 2016, it's happened. The other thing you'll see is there's a call in a single hour, 3 overlapping calls in an hour, and then 2 overlapping calls. So in 3 hours, did 6 calls. Report writing, going from one call to the other. So as you can see by these breakdowns per month, it's a visual representation. We're having issues responding. We're responding to all the calls, but we're putting a lot of stress on the system because we don't have the manpower we think really is necessary to handle this. And the chief will go in longer about the mutual aid calls and the increase we've seen. But this trend just didn't start this year. It's been on the way up for a while.
Brian, if you can just move to the side so we can actually get a good zoom on that so people at home can actually see
And
how much activity there was.
And one thing is to remember, as you look at the med calls, if it takes 2 people or 5 people for an ALS, we have to remember that once that ambulance leaves town, it takes about an hour for them to package the patient from the call, get to the hospital, offload the patient, meet with the doctor or the nurses there, download the information, start the paperwork that they have to do for the hospital, restock the supplies that we get from the hospital, get back in the truck, and come back to town. Those 3 or 2 to 5 people are gone from town or from our resource for 1 hour,
If you're lucky.
if we're lucky.
Yeah.
If it's snowing or we have inclement weather, they could be caught in traffic for 2 hours. And if it's an ALS call, I have 4 guys in the ambulance. That's half the staffing we have working their way back to town.
It's one of those things. We've looked at this, and you saw this last year. The trend continues. It's on an upward trajectory, but there's a lot of times we're kind of rolling the dice here as a town on having sufficient resources in reserve to handle that next call.
And also, I just want to bring up one quick thing. If you look at the white areas in that chart, okay, and people say, well, what are you doing there in those white areas? Well, we have so many requirements for EMS certification and training, our water rescue training, ice rescue, confined space, rope, trench, search, rescue, hazardous materials, vehicle extrication requirements, because now we have electric cars and we have new Mercedes and stuff that have titanium in them. So there's different ways to cut those and make those safe.
You got solar panels?
Solar panels we talked about, fire proficiencies. We don't have as many fires as we have had in the past, but we still have to train like we do have those fires. And then in the last 4 years, I think I've landed more helicopters in this town for advanced life support services than I have in the last 20 years. Okay, so people are going faster, people are hitting things maybe a little bit harder, but you know what I mean? All those things have to be taken in consideration when you're looking at this type of coverage for the town. So what we did in 2010, we looked at our total calls for fire and EMS, and we had 2,366 calls in 2010. And 2016, we have 22 total calls, which is about a 556 call increase, about 23%. That's where I came with the 23% in the beginning when we reviewed that information. And how'd that relate to? In 2010, there was 879 fire-related and 1,500 EMS, which was about 38 to 62%. And if you look at 2016, even though we had more calls, the 1,554 fire related to the 1,768 EMS, the percentages of the calls are about the same.
Interesting.
It's the type of calls that we're getting that are giving us more resource dependent, more ALS calls, so, you know what I mean? So that's giving us more fire calls. That's giving us more resource needed to handle these calls. And to break that down for EMS, again, as we said earlier, in 2010, on the other page, we had 1,507 EMS calls. In 2016, it was 1,768. But if you look at it, in 2010, we had about 49% of our calls were basic life support and 51 were ALS. In 2016, we still had about 41% BLS, but our ALS has increased to 58%, which is about a 38% increase in ALS calls alone. That is requiring from a minimum of 2 people on the ambulance to maybe up to 5 people on an ambulance. So, and that resource, again, leaves town for that 1 hour. So 36% increase in ALS calls, we're losing staffing for up to an hour within the community. We talked about mutual aid. This is the from 2010 to 2016 mutual aid stats. In 2010, we were about 26. 2012, okay, we gave 22 and received 47. 2014, we gave 38, received 41. But as you start looking in 15 and 16, it's starting to increase exponentially. So giving 29 calls and receiving 90 is huge. We had, I don't know, same issue, but there was an issue similar to this with Bedford where we were receiving a lot more than they were giving. They increased their staffing. Okay, so that came back to the norm. That's where they are. So as you can see by these charts, very graphic, that trend is moving more to abusing the mutual aid system because it's designed when you have a large incident. When we have a large fire, we need a lot of people, mutual aid comes in. When we have on the non-norm of these 4 EMS calls in an hour, that's not a norm, okay? That's when you use mutual aid. We can handle the 3, but the 4th one we just can't. So you bring a mutual aid to take care of that 1 call. But they shouldn't be coming in 90 times a year, to make up for those calls. Workers' comps from Primex. We did a lot of research from Primex. They provided us with a lot of information. And we had a quote from Phil St. Sierre, the risk management coordinator from Primex. And he said, quote, "The workers' comp trend indicates that claims frequency and severity are on the rise for the Merrimack Fire Department. It should be noted there are a couple of sizable claims." So looking back in 2012, there was about $41,000. You start looking into 2015-16, 236,000, 162,000. And some of those claims go over in years. So even though the money stops in 2015, it may roll over to 16. And if those 16s, even though that stops, that person's still injured, it's going to roll into 17.
Allie?
You may be wondering why we started with 2012 instead of 2010, and the reason why is because that's how long we've been consistently been using Primex for workers' comp, and it's impossible to get it from the other company.
Quick question. Chief, can you just, not that I want you to share any of this information with us, but looking back at these claims,
Yep.
Can you attribute them to a lack of staffing, or is it a particular severe injury somebody came up with that didn't necessarily have to do with
No,
a lack
most
staffing?
of the incidents that we've had in the last few years, I can contribute those to either on the job or stress off the job. So what does that mean? When we have, a lot of times we have mandatory overtime. So I have a paramedic that works 24-hour shift. So he comes in 8 in the morning and he's supposed to go home 8 the next morning. A paramedic calls in sick, and there's only 1 on the shift because we're a little short-handed. We're working on that now. So that medic now is mandatory to work another 24. Okay? That can happen up to 3 times. He could pull a 72-hour work shift. Okay? We try to stop it at 48 because after 48 hours of running the calls that you see here, and we have good people. Their skills start to deteriorate. I don't care who it is, me, anybody. You know what I mean? You're not as sharp as you were. So you start making lifting mistakes. If you start working 72 hours, you know when you go home, you have one day to get everything else done you have to, because you're coming back to work for your normal 24 the next day. So you get home, you try to get a few hours of sleep and finish mowing your lawn that you haven't done for years. And then now we're having some short-term, injuries claims that maybe they're not workman's comp, but they're coming from the point that we're working these people a lot, and they're trying to make up for their time at home or at work, and they're making just little mistakes.
Mandatory overtime must screw up the family schedule like crazy.
Mandatory overtime is not one of the most liked things in the world, but until we can, get the staffing needed to cover that, it's a necessary evil.
Oh, I understand.
It's going to be there.
But as a person who used to, on occasion, have
Yep.
to do, mandatory, because you can't leave your patients, trying to get coverage for my children.
Yep.
When I had to, it messes up your schedule for your family wicked.
It's tough, especially if they have a spouse that works, and you're planning on
Well, that's
daycare
the
for 1
family
day and you're
schedule.
home for 3, and it's tough on them, and it's very stressful. That home stress, they comes to work, and then it goes back home again, and that's where you see these lifting mistakes and stuff happen and occur.
Okay, thank you.
We talked about the process, development and process, so we put together a kind of a spreadsheet on what's out there. So if you look at the Pollard Road subdivision, which is still in process,
That you were asking.
they're looking at 13 single-family residentials. Dakota Road subdivision is still in process, they're looking at 10. Blanchard Point condos is 50. Those are separate condos, so I kind of put them into the housing because they're individual units. Tomasian Drive subdivision is 19 homes. Melton Associates, that is projected. They're looking at 32 apartments and 25 townhouses. The Bean Road subdivision is just 4, that's Bean Road and Babusick Lake Road. Chestnut Hill is the old Blood Road area. They're looking at 72 single-family homes out there. The Fidelity property, according to Tim, they're starting to move forward on the first phase, which is the apartment section that's going to be going out back towards the tracks.
Flatly.
That's Flatley, right?
Sorry. Hey, good idea. No wonder it's fuzzy. Hey, Flatley. No, I'm just kidding.
Actually, I just jumped ahead.
So the Flatley development is about 100, they're looking at 192 apartments, and then projected, looking at their plans for the complete buildup of the commercial side, is about 192,125 square feet. The Wood Springs Executive Park Drive is the hotel there. That's 120 rooms, but that's an extended stay hotel. So people could be living there and doing whatever they do in extended stay hotels. I'm just leaving that alone.
Good choice.
The Monahan development property by the Premium Outlets, if you look at that's all highlighted in orange, light orange, and that's the phase 1 and phase 2 of that development. And if you look at phase 1, if that goes through, they're looking at 192 apartments and 120 townhouses and 32,000 square foot conference center and restaurant. They're also looking at another commercial building of 32,000 square feet. In the phase 2 process, they're looking at another 64 apartment unit building. They're looking at another office, retail, and restaurant of 68,900 square feet. And then they're looking at a 254 parking garage, about 36,000 square feet, down the bottom of that hill from the Premium Outlet Mall.
Parking garage isn't going to add to your workload, right?
Fire.
Why do you add
Car
parking
fire.
garage in there, I guess?
Well, I had parking garage in there because when we have one car fire in a parking garage, it's usually about 3 or 4. And then depending on how far below grade it is going to be designed, and from what I understand, it's not going to be up, it's going to be down, so it's going to be closed in on all sides. We have to go down in there to find it, so you need special firefighting equipment, you need special standpipes in there, so that could be very manpower intensive just for one car fire in there. That's why it's something that's going to impact our response if we have a car fire.
I don't mean to be picky, but how
Yep.
often are we dealing with car fires in a parking lot? I mean, I understand
Parking
accidents.
lot, quite often. In the parking garage, we only had a few
Well,
at
I know we
Fidelity
don't
at this
have a lot
time.
of parking garage, but
Yeah.
we
We've
have
had a few,
standing
what,
park,
I
car
think 3 or
fires
4 at
frequently?
Fidelity at this point in time. One on the first floor, which was not bad. One on the top floor was a little tougher to get to. Our trucks don't fit inside, so we have to hand jack everything up.
Okay,
Hand carry, hand jack, sorry.
thank you.
Greenfield Farms, again, we're looking at another 66 single-family homes. On Executive Park Drive in the green, this is a either one or the other. And so there, if they go residential, it's going to be a 66 residential single-family. No, excuse me. Executive Park Drive is going to be one or the other. It's going to be either 200 apartments with a 3,500-foot clubhouse, or they're not going to build residential. They're going to go commercial with about 7,600, 240 square feet of retail space. The vaults,
76,000.
pardon?
76,000.
76,240.
Slow down, chief. Slow down.
Slow down. The vault at DW Highway, currently right now, if there are 2 storage buildings, is about 110,000 square feet. And Pennachuck Waterworks just completed their office and maintenance and storage building is 52,425 square feet. And Synergy self-storage on Danny Webster Highway is about 115,000 square feet. And that roof on that building is all solar panels. There's just enough room to walk between them from one end to the other.
Really?
So we're looking at a possibility of development of about 234 homes, 680 apartments, 25 townhouses, 240 hotel rooms, and over 720,000 square feet of retail space in the future coming into Merrimack. So then and now, where are we at? Okay, in 2010, we had 2 officers, 2 firefighter paramedics, and 5 firefighter EMTs on a shift. We are currently still running 2 officers, 2 firefighter paramedics, and 4 fire EMTs. And what we're requesting for 2018 is to bring us back to 2010 staffing levels of 2 officers, 2 firefighter paramedics, and 5 firefighter EMTs. So to kind of wrap this up in a summary, this is pretty much the same information that we had on the opening page. Okay, too many back-to-back calls, leaving the town inadequately protected too often. 23% increase in overall calls from 2010, 36% increase in ALS, advanced life support calls, requiring more responders rather than BLS requiring less responders. Significant increase in mutual aid, sizable workman's comp claims, the development we just spoke about, and again, we'd like to bring staffing levels back to 2010 levels. So I'd like to entertain any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions? None? Tom?
Not really a question. These charts that you have, the activity that you're doing won't change because you bring in new firefighters. What will happen is your ability to respond to those multiple calls in an hour will ease up a little bit if you bring in another firefighter.
That's
So,
correct. It's not going to
currently at
solve the
8.
problems, but it's going to help us respond to the calls we have going on and the multiple calls that we have going on.
And probably, to me, one of the most telling statistics here is the amount of mutual aid that you've had to receive this year of 90 versus giving 29. I mean, anytime you're short-staffed, you're having to receive mutual aid or call for mutual aid because you've got 2 teams out already and there's nobody left.
There's nobody left in the...
Are we calling mutual aid in whenever you do have 2 teams out so that there's coverage at the station, or?
I don't call mutual aid in for coverage unless we have a working building fire. So all the 90% of the mutual aid, 95, 98% of the mutual aid that we have coming in is going to the scene to assist us. The only time we call mutual aid to cover a station is when it's an engine, when everybody and the mutual aid companies are busy. We go out to the next layer, the Londonderrys, the Manchesters, to come in and cover our stations for that next call. Ambulances don't do mutual aid, so no, because of the amount of medical calls that every community has, we don't send ambulances to mutual aid. You only send them when you need them to transport a patient.
They don't
They don't
cover.
cover.
They'll
They don't
just
cover.
go if they're needed to the scene.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any sense of how many times we've had to use the private ambulances?
We don't
'Cause-
use private ambulances at all. We use
Okay.
a mutual aid group that we have a compact and agreement with.
Okay, so, Eileen?
Although Nashua uses a
Through, but
private
Nashua
ambulance
Nashua subcontracts AMR, and we're a member of Nashua's mutual aid group.
So
So
they
they
would
send
send-
through our
they-
mutual aid
that's the
agreement
question.
their
Okay.
Dispatch
EMS service, then they
Okay.
dispatch AMR to our scene.
That answers it, okay. I knew that there were some private ambulances that respond, I'm going,
Wait a minute.
Are you all set, Tom? All set?
Yeah,
Anybody else? Oh, I've got some.
go for it.
I want to challenge the idea of waiting till next January. I do understand, and whatever the council decides, fine, but let me just voice my concerns. We've acknowledged that there's a 23% increase in calls. There is a consensus, or there seems to be, there's a hope for a consensus, that the safety of the citizens are being questioned because of the too close of a balancing of what's available, what's needed, and what might be in the future. I think the safety of the firefighters is exemplified or demonstrated by the increased workers' comp. These are facts. These are not, gee, I wonder if. These are facts. There's mandatory overtime that's going on that on occasion will happen. It will still happen even with the additional people. Let's be realistic about it.
But not as often.
But it's not, it's often now. And that really bothers me. I mean, I think we cannot, and I made this statement a couple of years ago, we can't use mutual aid for staffing. That's not the purpose of it. So our waiting until January, why are we waiting? And I know it's a fiscal issue, but these things are not changing. And why are we waiting until January and not just do July? Because these things are still true. Injuries can happen. We're still on the border. So if money is the issue, then let's talk about money being the issue. Because the other things, in my opinion, outweigh it. Eileen?
I totally agree with you as far as that's concerned, and it was strictly a monetary thing from my perspective, and I'm sure that the chief and his staff acknowledge the fact that they would like them as soon as possible.
How long does it, let me ask you another question. Under the proposal of you wanting to, let me make sure I'm reading it right. The new position you're putting down as a firefighter.
Correct.
Why not firefighter, paramedic?
We're having such a hard time getting qualified paramedics that are firefighters into any department in the state. It's a crisis out there right now. Nobody can get them. And there's no incentives for a paramedic to leave another community to come here. There's just no incentives to do that. So what we did last year is, remember, we talked about training our own paramedics.
Right.
So I have a paramedic now that's completed his first year. We have another paramedic that we just hired that has almost completed his first and almost his second year, okay? And then I have two more in the waiting for next year to get them on board, because our thought process here, and I think we convinced that to the council last year, is we have good employees. Let's keep the good employees and make good paramedics out of them, rather than trying to shoot for a paramedic just because he's a paramedic and he may not be such a good employee. So by doing that, we're bringing the firefighters in. They want to advance. We have an interest in the department to bring that staffing, as we discussed last year, up to 3 paramedics per shift. Once you get that, now our mandatories drop, because now I have more paramedics that can rotate in and out of the shifts, and then you don't get the burnout that I think Assistant Chief Borneman discussed last year of a single guy running the ambulance all the time.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Just take it with you.
Sit down.
Nobody else here.
So and I think we've said firefighter, we are going to, our intent, obviously working with Eileen and Human Resources, we're going to post it firefighter, paramedic preferred. But we don't want to get locked into having to find 4 specific paramedics. If we
Gotcha.
can get 2 and 2, it helps us. The
So your
4
intention is to eventually, over a couple of years, to get that paramedic up to 3.
Correct.
Yes. So our intent, when we were
Per
to hire
shift.
these 4 preferred paramedic, but we may
Gotcha.
not get 4 of them at that time.
Gotcha. Paul and then Dan?
Chief, when does the list come out from the graduation of the fire academy?
The New Hampshire State eligibility list,
Yes.
it's in process now. It's usually available end of July, beginning of August, if they have that out
He's my hiring expert.
at that time.
So,
So I think what you're getting at is it would be difficult to say July because we may be waiting for a new list to come out. So it may, there's a recruiting process and all that kind of
But
thing.
you never know. I mean, if you recruited it for July, you may not fill it till October because you're waiting for the list, but you just might get someone interested in wanting to transfer or something.
Yes. Potentially.
Dan?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys might want to just say we'd rather hire a fireman and give him an incentive to add to his resume a paramedic. It seems like you'd rather bring on firemen, turn them into paramedics as well to round them off in their duties.
But not every fireman wants to be a paramedic, and a lot of firemen would be an advanced EMT, and that's kind of where they want to stay. They have the advanced care, they can do ALS, but that's where they want to stay.
What he's saying is, and let me just add to that, because we're having such a difficult time all around the state, attracting everyone, it keeps raising their pay scales for paramedics, and there's a small amount, and there's a lot of competition for them, that we, not only do we want to and give people opportunities to become paramedics of people that we know are good employees, so what Dan is saying is correct, and if we can get paramedics, we'll get them, and if we can't, then we'll train them.
Correct, for those people that want to be paramedics. It doesn't mean that there are paramedic firefighters out there that meet our needs and have good reputations. I want to make sure that
Sure. I guess I think
there.
when I look at you guys, we're all white shirts. I call you the white shirts, but you always
All
did.
three of us?
You know,
There's a couple
all
of
three
guys
of us.
over
Wow.
there.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, all 3 white shirts. Do it.
they
There's 2 regular guys over there.
most of you guys don't go in starting or really to rank and whether it's the police department or you guys, whether you day one, you're not probably dreaming right away when you're going to be a sergeant or lieutenant and captain, et cetera. And I think along the way, many people that maybe it's just my generation. I think they go for the white shirt job because there's more money. And back in maybe it was in the 70s and the 80s where it was $200 a month was big money for someone to say, yeah, I don't want to really be a sergeant, but it's $200 more a month. And I'm wondering if you hire the fireman first and then create a bonus or an incentive to get him to become that paramedic certified, that if it had the extra money, that would be another reason why he would do it. That maybe it wasn't his first calling, it may not be his second calling, but maybe there's an incentive in there, in the department, that why he would do it for that reason. Just like you guys have climbed up the management ladder because maybe it was somewhat financial, but also other issues that you were interested in doing it.
Well, that's why we've made the paramedics a little bit more.
Yep. Because I know, as you said, for the last few years, it's just getting harder and harder to find the people that you need. But if you can get the firefighter green right out of school, within 2 years, he's thinking, geez, I can make a few extra bucks if I get that certification.
And that's what we're doing now. We have 2 in
Yeah.
that process, and we have 2 that are interested in that process.
Yep.
Ellie?
I think that firefighters and police officers, it's more of a calling than just a job to make a certain amount of money, because often they've wanted to do it since they were children. and, you know, they've admired firefighters.
Don't underestimate the power of money.
It's a different, I'm not saying it's not about money, it's, hey, I'm talking here. So, anyway, so we, so as I said, I think more cases than not, it has to do with the fact that they want to be a firefighter. I personally wouldn't want to be a firefighter. It's a dangerous job. It's can be very labor intensive, and it wreaks havoc on your body over time from lifting and doing those kinds of things. So so I think that the firefighters, when they're hired, they aren't necessarily looking to be chief. Maybe at the end of their careers, they're looking more to be chief with all the experience that they have. But I think between being brand new and being chief, there's a lot of desire to improve your skills, and it's the skill level that gives you the more money. So we have kind of a two-part paramedic attraction program. One is we train them either in-house or pay them to go to various courses that they need. And two, we recently, in our last contract negotiations, it might not be a lot of money, but we have actually differentiated and increased the wages of a paramedic versus a firefighter whereby they used to be in the same exact category. So.
I think one other point too is, I know everybody all the fire departments know each other. It's like all the hospitals know each other. Everybody knows what goes on. And the idea of forced overtime would not be an incentive for people to move to Merrimack. So I think we need to stop that cycle. I think I do agree with you that there's not many out there, and that's where the competition is. But if I'm a paramedic that could go there, and boy, they're doing a lot of forced overtime there, I go, you'd have to give me a lot of money to make that. That's all I'm saying. So I would like to, obviously this is not the appropriate time, but I would like to be able to have the figures available for when we do the overview or the final decisions, but what the cost would be, and it won't be July. I mean, what would it be from July 1st versus January? The cost of four. Yeah. Whatever the request is, but instead of January, July 1st.
The total cost for a full year of the 4 firefighters.
See, that's what he gets paid the big
including
bucks for.
Including uniforms,
Whatever the subsequent cost would be, yeah.
is 100. The total cost is $361,475. That's the total cost. The additional cost, on top of what Eileen has proposed,
No, this is 4 positions from July.
From
Okay.
July 1st,
Yeah.
would be $175,138 additional.
So
Additional for what?
For the extra 6 months.
For the extra 6
6
months.
months.
The extra 6 months.
But would it really be 6 months?
That,
If you calculate it
Depends
that way,
upon when you get them,
That's the
right?
question.
that's
Yeah.
the question when we, but I'm just giving you the cost for a full 12
Okay,
months
so
right
the
now.
difference between starting in July versus starting in January is $175,000, basically.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, Dan?
I said it a year ago, so I'm going to just say it again because I don't think anything has changed. But right now, we currently have 8 men per shift, but nobody's proven me wrong yet when I say it's not really 8 men, because when you have a staff right now from our budget books, we can all add it up. We have a 36-member staff, 36 times roughly 3 weeks vacation, averaging 5 years. It's over 100 weeks. So we know there's 52 weeks in a year. So every week someone's out on vacation. So every week,
Theoretically.
there's already a forced overtime. That to me is a broken company. If I had a private business running that way, I wouldn't run the business that way. So I don't see how 8 is working for you guys. I don't see how it was working a year ago. I'm in favor of the 4 positions. I'm not in favor of raising taxes in order to accomplish it, but I'm not in favor of running this department the way we're going. And thanks for all the hard work and the grasp, because it just reinforces the case that we're not doing it right. It's not very complicated for me. 8 men isn't enough because 8 doesn't mean 8. So by adding the 4th person per shift, 1 guy per 4 shifts puts you where you're supposed to be. And I just think inevitably the overtime will come down. Now in our budget books right now, our budget for overtime supervisors has 178,000, and the rest is 349,000 for a total of $527,000 for overtime for this year's budget. I think spending over $500,000 in overtime, again, is not prudent. That's not the right thing to do. So, again, I support the positions based on that information I've been given, and I don't really see any gray area in making this decision for myself. So, plain and simple, that's where I stand on it. And thanks for the work you guys did on it. Made my mind very clear from the beginning. So.
Bill Boyd did have a question I promised I would ask. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Bill. He's going to watch this and see, why did she have to say that? He would like to know if you foresee anything in the next 3 years, not with this budget, but we should be thinking down the road that this council should be considering regarding the fire department. Aside from the new building that you want, I know. Is
So
there
you're
anything?
talking about any additional staffing, or
Well, just
what
in
are you talking
general,
about in 3
or
years?
resources, or,
Well, resources of a new fire station is very important, that we have to, because the station we have is very outdated, and that's something that needs to be discussed. Continuing maintenance on the fire stations in the next few years is probably going to go up, because even Station 1's starting to show some wear and tear, and we've been working on it and doing a good job with it. As it goes to staffing, when you put staffing on, and I think I'm going to follow up with Councilor Dwyer, if you put staffing on to drop them, you're not doing any service to the community for that staffing to save overtime. You have to decide what number you want. Okay, so if you want, I'm going to throw this out there just as because it's an easy number for me. If you want 10 guys on a shift, okay, and you determine that's the number, or 9 on a shift, where we, by contract, allow 2 firefighters out and 1 officer. So if you want to keep 9 staffing, you need to put 11 people on, so you're dropping 2 sacrificial lambs to keep that 9 all the time. Okay, same thing with an officer. If you want 2 officers on all the time, you put 3 on because somebody's going to take a vacation. You hit the numbers right on. That person's going to be the sacrificial then your overtime's going to drop because you're at that minimum staffing, where you're going to have those, I guess, the sacrificial employees to cover those times when people are taking that. Hate to use that term, but
Yeah, I wouldn't use that
flatline sacrificial. We have to get our lingo a little.
Not exactly the best choice of words.
And not when they're on the beach, too.
It's inevitable. The bigger you get, any business, when you start reaching a point where you've got hundreds of employees, and we have 220, when you think about the overall town, and then you throw in your teachers, the bigger you get, vacation and leave is a part of your monthly routine. And we are at that number. Clearly, we're at that number, where every week, sometimes 2, there's somebody who's out on vacation. Every single week. So I don't know how you overcome that.
Well, I think what the chief was just saying, if I understood him correctly, is we don't backfill immediately. We lose
Let
the
it go down.
couple that he said. So
Right.
that's where you do save your overtime, because some guy's going to be on vacation. You're going to be running shorter than what we would prefer, what
Right.
they would prefer in particular.
But what you need to do is
Right.
determine what that minimum staffing is. So if that minimum
Right.
staffing's 10 firefighters,
You
you have
right.
12 firefighters, and then you drop 2, and then you have 10 on duty all the time.
Which
And
is
there
no
may be a
overtime.
time when somebody calls in sick, you have 3 out, but that overtime number is going to dwindle exponentially.
Right.
And the same thing with an officer. We talked about officer training. If you have 3 officers on a shift and an officer takes a vacation, now we have We don't have to fill the officer for overtime, but we have an opportunity now to take a master firefighter and train him to be that next officer, because we have that opening on that shift that you're not filling, but it's a need to bring that education level up.
I think it's inevitable if you brought on 4 new people that the overtime would come down. I think it's more difficult to predict by how much, because predicting the future calls is just something that you can't really do. But I think in a common sense world, you can count on the next couple of years in a row that the number would get smaller.
And I would suspect that the number of mutual aids would go down, and
Well, it
hopefully.
depends on when you're dropping. So if we have 9, we drop to 8, we're at that right now, okay?
Right.
So we're not providing any more personnel to offset all those calls. We're just using that one person to offset overtime. So if you want to offset calls, you have to add the 9 and stay at the 9, and then your overtime doesn't change. And if you think that at that 9 mandatory, or 9 all the time is going to benefit our calls, then that's where that overtime number is.
Eileen?
I just want
Yeah,
to say
yeah.
that we're not asking for 9
no.
all the time right now. So like right now, what
Step
we
at a
had
time.
asked you, and what they currently do that's requiring the mandatory overtime is that we're staffing always to 8, even though, and that's why the overtime is up. And what we're proposing here is what we had back in 2010, which is to have 9 people on a shift, and dropping to 8 if somebody is out. So what I believe the chief is talking about is the future, which is, in the future, he's saying that if maybe over the next 3 years, you may want to have 9 and maintain 9 as being the mandatory, rather than dropping back down to 8.
And that answers Councilor Boyd's question of future possibilities, and it goes along with
But see,
Councilor
in the
Dwyer's
meantime, in the
numbers.
next 3 years, or whatever it is, that's what, we still look at that same data.
Yeah,
We
look at the
still look
data.
at the workers' comp, we still
And
look at the
what's good,
calls.
As we said, once we set the baseline of 8, now we have specific numbers. That's not going to change now. So we're going to be able to get a good number of what that 8 costs for overtime to maintain it.
Right.
And then dropping 1, what that's going to be over the next year, because you're going to see that number. But we have a baseline. As long as we
That's
maintain that baseline, we'll have excellent data on overtime, and that'll answer, I think, Councilor Dwyer's questions are, what is that vacation going to impact that overtime by?
Right.
You'll have some
The true
data for it,
impact.
but it's going to take time to collect that data.
Right. Jackie?
Oh, yes. It would seem to me, first of all, I think we're going to border on irresponsible if we don't do something about our staffing. I think these surrounding towns are going to come to our meetings and ask us to. And it seems to me that summer would be a better time to hire if that's when they graduate and there are new firefighters perhaps available, more available in July or August. So that kind of makes sense to me too. And it seems with the building that's going on, and you have it right there in the chart, that I think we're silly to think that this is the last time we're going to have to increase. It looks like the town's population is going to be jumping over the next 5 years, after I think we've been pretty stable during the recession, and then it suddenly picked up last year. So I think we're going to be paying for that, and I hope getting some tax money in return to help. And I do have a question about overtime on holidays. For example, on not maybe a big holiday, but say, I don't know, July 4th or something like that, which is certainly a big holiday. You're staffing regular, this is my favorite holiday. You're staffing all, every day.
365, yeah.
Yep, 24/7. Do they get overtime just because it's the 4th of July?
Yeah.
I can handle that.
Explain that.
The only people who get overtime on a holiday in the town, fire, police, regular DPW workers, is if they work the holiday. So if the 8 guys that are on staff on July 4th for the fire department, they'll get overtime because they're working the holiday.
Okay.
So if they work it, they get overtime.
Yeah.
It isn't just automatic for them. They have to be working and on shift to get the overtime.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but they do. Very good, okay. Thank you.
Any other
Yeah.
questions?
That's part of our holiday line item, though, right? That's not part of our overtime line item.
It's actually in overtime. If you look at the
Oh,
overtime 8105 and 8111, there's a separate line for each one of
Well,
them that
yeah,
says
okay.
overtime,
Which is part of the total. You're
which
right.
is part of the total. So we try to break that out so you could see. And that overtime will be there no matter what, so to speak, because these guys are working on that shift.
I have one other question.
Go right ahead,
when you're
Tom. I'm all done.
done.
Until I think of something
This chart is nice. I'm curious as to why there are different lengths of time for the various hours, different size squares, why they're not all the same.
That's because when the calls are put in, the calls may, on the charts that I use, we use them for different purposes on the type of calls. So the ones that I look at on my computer have all the calls listed into it. So depending on the type of call, it might have more than 4 or 5 characters. So that keeps wrapping and causing that cell to get larger. That's all it is.
From a graphical perspective, because you're using this as a graphical
Yep.
that's distorting the view. And if you don't have a particular reason for it, like there's 4 or 5 calls in that hour, it seems like we ought to make an effort, if you're going to use this graphically, to keep them all uniform in time.
And I can do that in the future for your presentations, but we use it
No, I
differently. But
I
yeah,
get it.
understand.
You've
Yeah.
got your own
Yep.
needs,
Yep.
but if you're going to make a graphical presentation, it would be nice if
I can
we could
adjust
either
those.
explain why there's differences or make them all uniform.
It's easy to adjust that in Excel.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Oh, okay. Well, hopefully you have some feedback and you can watch our final discussion and see what happens.
Great, thank you very much.
One more thing for
one
fire.
more thing.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sure, now you're thinking
I'm sorry, I
something.
meant
Go
to
ahead.
ask a while ago, and I didn't want to do it during that. Just real quick, the call volunteers, I guess, the call guys.
Call division.
Yeah, still got that going a little bit?
We tried this year. We actually, Assistant Chief Borneman stepped up to the plate, and we're going to try to reinvigorate that program. We ran a test, and we had, I think, 4 or 5 candidates. 1 passed. And it's not that it's a difficult test, but what happens is I have to put them and pay for their firefighter 1 and their EMT, and they have a general aptitude test that was not built by us, it's built by an outside firm for just general aptitude to pass a written test, to certify to qualify for that program. Some people pass it, some don't, and then we have a physical ability test, which, as we indicated, this is a very physical job, so we have a lot of people that don't make the physical ability test.
So you're working on that this year?
So
see what-
hopefully what we're looking at is we ran this program, we received 1 out of the 4 or 5, unless you want to highlight on that, and then we plan on running a couple through the summer, see if we can invigorate that program. If we can't, then we have to look at just doing away with the program and then taking those funds that we're not using and put them to where they can be better used.
Jim Bailey still participating?
No,
He's
he's,
retired?
yeah.
Because he's older.
On the call issue, it's becoming harder and harder because of the complexity of this job.
Sure. Nope.
And the call guys, we actually have several call guys that we trained, that we hired. But a lot of them, you know, they're looking for that full-time job. They come, put in some time, and then, you know, move to another department if we couldn't hire them or whatever. So it's similar across the country, especially in a community like ours, to attract people that want to put in the time and effort and expose themselves to the same thing that you would get for a full-time career, basically. Might take a little longer, and do it basically as a part-time
Right.
gig. It's pretty
I saw
involved.
the line, and that's what it jumped out at me earlier, and I just, let's see how that was going.
Try to
Appreciate
invigorate
it.
it one more time and see what happens
Yep.
this year.
Good.
Paul, you wanted to say something?
If you're done with the discussion of 03 fire, we have one other thing we need to touch real quick, is that the other special revenue tab for the people who have the computers, or I believe it says outside detail in the books towards the back. Fire actually has outside details that they handle also. So we just need to discuss that real quick.
Why
Page
151
151 in the books.
in the books, or if you have the computer, it's other special revenue.
And this is like the police details, it's basically.
It's basically the sa-
Tax neutral?
Yes, it's tax neutral. The fire department has 3 that I am aware of. The first one is the triathlon that the YMCA does.
Correct.
There is also Rib Fest, and the third one's escaping me. There is another one. I thought that this year we had a third one. I think somebody asked for another race or something for you guys.
I don't recall.
Yeah, so
But-
there's 2.
EMS coverage.
Ribfest is the big one,
broken out?
and
Oh,
also,
okay.
Other special revenue.
I just,
Yeah.
I have that, I just couldn't see the line. but
just as a highlight, add on to that, we have an issue, and it hasn't happened, but recently, about 6 years ago, we had some fire alarm systems that went out of service in the apartment buildings, and the owner couldn't provide a fire watch, so they paid us to have a fire watch for the night. You can't have a residential apartment building without an operating fire alarm system or somebody in there that's qualified to do that.
So it was a person fire alarm.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes, Helen?
So just to remind you again, and for members of the public, that this number is an estimate, and it has increased somewhat, and it won't be spent unless we have the calls to support it. So there's an equal amount of revenue that comes in for the expenditure, to offset the expenditures.
I remember the third one, Girl Scouts.
That was going to drive you crazy.
And what our fire marshal has done is they've trained a lot of companies to have their own fire watch to ease their burden and stuff like that too, so it works out very well. So it's kind of a full round process.
Okay, I think we're all set. Oh, you have another?
So not that there's a big number here, but there's a fairly big discrepancy between the department's request and the town manager's budget. Do you want to mention that, or?
Yes, I just, how do I say this? We have had some discussions with RibFest, for instance, as to how many firefighters are attending. So we're going to be reevaluating that. They actually weren't going to pay the whole bill. They actually had a lawyer call us and tell us they weren't going to pay any of the bill, I believe. So we're going to be evaluating
Negotiating.
what level of staffing needs to be there. Do you need to have, the assistant chief there, for instance, that costs a certain amount of money, or do you need to have just regular firefighter paramedics? So.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Well,
What's their purpose in being there?
For any type of incident that would happen, a fire with any of the events, any medical. The last Ribfest we had, we transported multiple patients out of there, a couple with broken legs, a lot of kids. So, and you have somebody right on scene to take care of that. It's their event. And then we inspect throughout the day the propane, how they handle propane, and fire marshal does it once in the beginning, and then instead of him coming back and inspecting and charging that, the crews that are on duty will continue their walk around for propane storage, handling and that type of stuff, fire protection for things that they cover with flammables, just to keep the public safe is what it is. And then we do a pre-plan for all the major incidents in event of a major incident, a shooting or something in that line, what we have to take care of that. It's just one of those, we have a large venue, you need to make sure you have your ducks in a row if you're going to be there to protect citizens within the community.
I'm glad we've mentioned this tonight, because it is something that I had a monstrous complaint from somebody who was up in Pittsfield, as I remember, who was a vendor at our Rib Fest, and he was angry as could be at Merrimack. And I wanted to defend us, but I had a difficult time, because I don't know how, well, I know how we came up with our numbers, but I would like us to, in fact, look at other communities that do I mean, maybe not an event as large as this, but the type of thing.
Was it the permits that they were?
It was all of it together, yes. It was the permitting, the individual things, the total cost, the hoops that the individual vendors had to jump through in order to make it work. He wasn't pleased, and he does a bunch of these, and so he said we were the worst, so.
Keep in mind that our current manager has some experience with a rather large
absolutely.
annual
And that's what I was gonna
event.
say. And since Bill Boyd isn't here, and I don't have to apologize for using the name, obviously, I was in Laconia for 11 years, and
Gee, what goes on with
we had the bike week, and the expenses were much, much higher, and which included crazy amounts of money that people had to pay for renting their space as close as they could to the event from private owners. The town had a fee. Then there were other fees for propane tanks and inspections of food. We actually had a food inspector to make sure that proper hygiene and all those kinds of things. So your person from Pittsfield
yes.
does not go to Bike Week, if that's what he's saying.
No, he didn't say he went to Bike Week, but he does a lot of the venues, the Deerfields, all those things.
And I can't imagine that that's so unless the town is supplementing or augmenting the event, which in Laconia they don't.
Sure. I mean, obviously not tonight, but at some point, maybe we could look at the total thing again, just, or at least I could, just to get a better feel for it myself.
So you have an answer?
Yep. Thanks.
And he always has the other option.
Not going, no, absolutely. That's true, but it is a good event that brings a lot of people into our community, and so
Yeah, it
that's
does.
something that we should go into
No,
the equation as
Well,
well.
we're talking two different things now, Finley. If you're talking about the event piece of it and his ability to be there, those are two different things. He's gonna make a business decision.
Right, but
Plain
I
and
don't
simple.
even think that was it. I don't think it had much to do with that. It was the aggravation of the whole thing. And again, it was probably about 9 months ago that we had this conversation, and I've never brought it forward because I didn't think about it since then until tonight when you mentioned it. So it's just something that I would like to look into. Not everybody else has to be bothered with it, but I'd
You
like
can
to
be a
run through it
task
again.
force of one.
Oh, that's exciting.
We also intend to do so.
Yeah.
Because that question was brought up from the Rotary, as far as the staffing and the personnel that we require to
Yep.
be there. But I would also say that I can't imagine that, as I said before, that other communities could charge less. I mean,
Less.
Merrimack used to charge nothing except for their police and fire that needed to be there. But now we have a fee, and Kristen does a wonderful job. She has to babysit the vendors. She does. I need this, I need that, I need that.
So
And
the
they'll
requirements is
they'll
what's
call,
Yeah, and
they'll call and they'll say, you know, here's your list. You were here last year and the year before. You know what the things that you have to do. And then they'll call and blame us for not telling them. And they actually receive emails if they came the year before. This is what's required. She receives many, many, many phone calls. So there was a time when we had a bit of a learning curve for everyone, for the vendors as well as our staff, but now it's a very well-oiled machine.
I'm sure.
And then when Eileen says Rotary, it's the Nashua Rotary West.
Right.
It's not Merrimack.
Right.
Nashua
Good
Rotary
point.
West is putting on this event.
Right.
I don't know how much Nashua would charge.
Why do you think they're here?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's a good possibility.
that's exactly right.
That's a good possibility.
Okay, guys, you don't have
Strictly
to
a
listen to us
fundraiser.
complaining.
Sorry.
Okay, you all said, you've said everything? Okay, thank
Fire
you.
protection other, is that gonna get covered?
He's gonna do, yeah. I had asked that too because I didn't know. Thank you.
I wouldn't want to say this, but the nature of the people who have been setting up for a couple of days and waiting
Okay, the next thing we're going to do, and Paul's getting set up, there's issuance. Do we want to take, why don't we take 5 minutes? Let's take 5 minutes so we can just stand for a minute. Recess for 5 minutes. Convene this meeting, please. Paul, you're going to go through, I'm assuming, the debt service,
Yes.
right, which is tab 27. We are going to talk about fire protection, which is 33. That's
Yes.
just a quick little tidbit. And then do the revenues, which is the last tab. Is that correct?
That is
Okay.
correct, Madam Chair.
So first, debt service, tab 27.
With me is Deputy Finance Director Tom Boland. He's the
Hi,
guy who's
Tom.
been lurking in the back of the room for those that see him in the
He's been
camera.
trying to hide, but it's
Yeah,
not working.
Yeah, so I told him he has to come up here now.
But he spends a lot of time working on the budget.
He does.
Don't let him fool you.
Yeah, he is. He's crunching numbers. I think he hates when I come back and say, "Crunch me a new number." So, but I'd like to talk about debt service right now. I'm only going to talk about the general fund debt service that affects the tax rate. And Eileen, if you could pass out those handouts, please. Yes, so they actually don't have to try to strain their eyes and. So right now, the town of Merrimack has two bonds, and what I'm showing up on the screen is the summary of what the two bonds have. We have 6 years left on our two bonds. One bond is expiring in 2018. You'll see that one, and then the next bond expires in 2023. Our total debt payment for fiscal year 17-18 would be $426,650. Principal being $390,000, interest being $36,650. The two bonds that we have outstanding are Greens Pond Land Acquisition Bond. We did a 15-year bond. The last payment will be done August 2018 for August 15, 2017. I'm sorry, for $270,000. Please keep in mind that amount of money, $270,000. And then
2017, I'm sorry.
2017.
It says 8:30 sheet, that's a mistake.
That's June 30th. That's our, we do everything for the end of the fiscal year, but the principal payment comes August 17. That $270,000 will be the last payment for the Greens Pond acquisition, which was a 15-year bond. We also have one outstanding bond after that. It's our drainage bond, which was also a 15-year bond. That payment will be $120,000 due on August 15th, 17. And then we have two principal payments, one in August and then one again in February. That bond will run to 2023. And as you'll see, it's principal. It starts getting principal heavy towards the latter part of the bond. In 19, it's 125. Then it goes up to 130. 140, 145, and then $155,000. Back when this bond was taken out in 2008 to get the bond bank, when they were trying to get bidders to bid on these bonds, they had to do some creative, not creativeness, but trying to get people interested in applying and bidding on these bonds to get the best rates for the communities. So that's why it's back-heavy principal. So I just want to give you those two items. That is our current. As you know, on Thursday night, we have a discussion about a highway garage. What I wanted to show you was I wanted to show you what a 30-year bond would be. And why a 30-year bond? We talked about this a little bit. Yes. Yes. Yes, I can. Is that better? Okay. So what I want to show is a 30-year bond for $3.3 million. And when we get into the discussion, you'll understand on Thursday night where the $3.3 million comes with the options that are there. But I just wanted to show how this works. So if we do a 30-year bond, which most houses, when you buy your house, you take out a 30-year mortgage. this building is like buying a house. It's going to be looking at a 30-year. The interest rate's 3.75 estimated. And the total payment for the first year would be $231,000. Remember I asked you to keep the 270 in mind? This bond, if we do a highway garage and we do put a bond request on the agenda, this bond will supplant the $270,000. That $270,000 has been in effect for 15 years. So it's been in the previous 15 years' budget. So we're not going to be raising additional appropriations for either option, a 20-year bond or a 30-year bond. But this bond will come to $231,000 in the first year, and then from there it would be less. It's less throughout the remaining 30 years. The big thing to know is that this number right here, this the interest totals $1,856,000 for a 30-year bond. Okay? Now, looking at the normal 20-year bond that was discussed the last time this was brought up, the total payment in the first year is $269,000, almost $270,000. The interest rate is estimated to be 3.25%. That is a little bit, talking to the bond bank, New Hampshire Bond Bank, the reason why the town of Merrimack doesn't go in bond itself is because we have such little debt. We have only those two bonds in the general fund, and we utilize for our wastewater something called the State Revolving Fund, which is a sewer improvement fund that the state, and we get incredible interest rates when we use that sewer revolving fund. So we don't really have a lot of debt that we go out and would need to bond. So we utilize what is called the New Hampshire Bond Bank. The New Hampshire Bond Bank bonds all smaller communities and anybody who wants to go out and bond, and they lump it all together to try to go out and get the best interest rates possible. When talking to the New Hampshire Bond Bank, they have seen an uptick in the interest rates in the last 6 months on these bonds. The last sale they had was about a 2.75% for a 20-year bond, and that was done last July. They usually have one in July and December. December, there wasn't what they call enough interest to do a bond sale. So they don't have the rates, but they're seeing an uptick. So they're estimating to be a 3.25% bond when we come around if the bond gets passed. But the big thing is that I wanted to say that no matter either one of these, the $270,000, both either the 20-year option or the 30-year option, we'd be underneath that $270,000 that we have in this year's budget, and this bond would be supplanting that $270,000 moving forward. And the interest on this,
I'm sorry.
The interest on this is $1,072,000, or roughly about $800,000 different than the 30-year bond. So this one would be $800,000 less overall for the bond interest.
Nancy?
Yes, Ellen.
The only thing that I wanted to say is that was one of the areas of concern when we put forward the last bond issue, was that there was going to be overlap in the bonds, that one wasn't going to be completely paid for before we introduced another similar payment. So this addresses that now.
Perfect.
Right.
Jackie and then Finley?
Okay, we'll both get served. What is our credit rating?
The last time we had a credit rating were A, small a. To get a credit,
A, small a?
A, small a. To get a credit rating for the town of Merrimack, it would cost between $15,000 and $20,000. We actually have to pay the rating agencies to come in and rate us. Yeah.
And
So we just,
and the bond, but the bond bank gets incredible rates,
Right.
and they're
A, small a.
A small a. So
So,
I don't
and-
believe that we would necessarily increase.
right. there's only one AAA community that I'm aware of in the state of New Hampshire. It happened 3 years ago, and that was Bedford. And they really worked extremely hard to get that AAA rating. Most communities in the state are small A's.
For a person who has no idea what the implications are, what are the advantages of being a AAA versus
what do they
whatever?
get?
All right, the
Is that gonna be
advantage.
your question?
Right.
I don't profess to know everything about this, but think of it as if you're in school, an A plus, an A, an A minus, and if you're looking at a graded scale, a 4.0, a 3.5, a 3.25, for instance, a AAA would get you better interest rates because it's a higher marking for you. An A small a would get you a little bit less of an interest rate. So if you had a AAA, it might be a 3% versus a 3.25 for an A small a. If you were an A small a minus, you would get maybe 3.33.
But rates are so historically low right now anyway. It's like
Right.
we're really talking marginal rates
Right.
between Bedford and ourselves.
Correct. And it all depends on how much you're bonding. Somebody for a $3 million bond,
Yeah.
we might not get great rates if we went out on our own. But if for instance, the bond bank is bonding 4 or 5 communities, they might be able to put out $12 million. They would get a better rate because there would be more investors fighting for those bonds.
It's like Bedford had borrowed 30 million, right, for their road project.
Actually, I think it was 20 million for 3 years. It was almost $60 million that they bonded when they were AAA. And
Here we are worried
another
about-
community that bonds all the time by themselves is Dover. They're an A small A.
They bond every year.
Every year, he goes out and bonds. Actually, between Dover and Milford, they call up and they want to know how Merrimack does such a
So they don't do
low
capital
debt.
reserve funds then?
No, they do not.
Okay.
They do not. And
That's
that's sort of why we are less debt too, is because we do fund our capital reserves and
Which is why
some
we
of
should
our
be
equipment.
AAA. I don't get it, but
Well,
it's
we
okay
are,
with
we're
me.
just not gonna pay 25,000,
Well,
find
we
out.
might be, okay.
Yeah.
You're right, we're not gonna spend the money.
Right. And there's additional things too with, like, when I say $15,000, there's an additional audit that is needed. It's called the Comprehensive Audit, CAFR.
In order to-
Annual, yeah, right, financial statement. That goes back 10 years. And then it looks forward 10 years. So it'd be something that we'd have to compile and then audit. And that's an additional money by the auditors to come in, and that's $3,000 to $5,000 for them to audit that, to send it to the rating agencies to say, yes, this is what you have.
Right.
So
And we don't have to do that because we go through the state.
the state
bank.
bond bank, right?
Yeah,
Did you have that? That was your question?
it wasn't, but I forgot what that was, so I'm good right
I'm
now.
sorry.
No, gosh, no.
Jackie, did you?
Yeah,
have-
I think you just answered my question. Who sells these bonds for us?
The New Hampshire Bond Bank, it's the state of New Hampshire. It's a separate board. They have their own commissioners and they all own trustees that get together. They have their own legal counsel. They have their own investment person who they get to help them sell these bonds on the market.
So they don't go out to the markets in New York or anything?
Yeah, I think one of the last market that we are with, matter of fact, my bond payments should go to New York and which bank in New York? It's a bank in upstate New York, Albany, that we send our payments to because they won the bid.
Okay.
All set. Okay, we move on to fire protection.
Fire protection. This is one of the
That's number 33.
33.
10.
This is hydrant fees fully offset by assessments and the people in the area. This is down on Manchester Street, and this is fully offset in the tax rate. They have a special assessment on their tax bills to pay this hydrant fee. So the money, what we budget for it, and then we collect it in tax dollars from those individuals. There's a big jump. It's been running between the last few years. It's been $86,000 in the budget, there's a big jump of about 19%. And that is the reason because Pennachuck just went in for a rate increase in front of the PUC, and they're projecting to be around the 20% increase. So that's why we have a jump to $99,000. I just want to make this sure that everybody understands this is fully offset by revenues through the tax process of those homes in that area.
Eileen?
Correct.
Oh, DJ.
Oh, the reason why it's a separate fire protection area and people have to pay a separate amount of money that live in that area is because the water is coming from the Pennachuck system and not from MBD. And Pennachuck has much higher rates and will be having even higher rates.
Dan?
I assume the Heron Cove neighborhood has affected everybody in that community.
Yeah, anybody in that area, anybody in that area would definitely.
And yet, this is a
be seeing it.
projection, so if the PUC denies them, there would be no increase.
There would be no, there would not be an increase. This gets set in October. A memo goes out to, usually in June, July, we get a letter from Pennachuck saying what they're going to be charging us on a monthly basis. This gets sent up to DRA as a separate taxing authority. And basically what happens is, not to get too technical in the weeds, I send up this number to DRA, I divide it by what the assessed value in that area is. They get an added 33, 37 cents on top of their tax bill to pay for this. And it's everybody in that area of town. And then we collect the money and it goes out to Pennachuck.
Great. All set? Okay, let's move on to revenues, which is the last tab.
Yes, it's the last tab.
Other special or revolving fund?
General fund. If you go all the way up to the top of, it says revenue. And if you got the computers,
Revenue.
it's the revenue one.
Back in-
The revenue one is the detail, the revenue two is the summary. So the last tab would be revenue. It starts off in the computer screen, the first line says transfer from cable fund.
Yep.
Okay. Revenues, with major increases is we talked about, $50,000 increase from the cable fund to the general fund to help offset taxes. We have state and federal grants due to the bridges that we talked about in highway the other night. Transfer for capital reserves went up because what we deposited we're taking out. That surplus number that's in the budget for the $300,000. That was something that Eileen talked about. The council gave back $300,000 last year. We continued that forward to this year in revenue. Fire and ambulance, as you can see, we've been collecting in $700,000 in the last couple of years. We raised that to $675,000. We feel comfortable with the $675,000 to collect for ambulance. Continuing down, code enforcement, underneath building permits. We have seen a spike in building permits, and as the chief talked about in his presentation, with everything coming up, we feel that, $135,000.
Where are you? I'm sorry.
Line 66 in the book. Yeah. Right here.
Next page down.
Yeah,
66.
66, line 66. We increased that $135,000 for building permits. 100 to 135,000 from 100, so additional $35,000.
Why was there a spike in 15, 16? 179. Do we understand that, or?
Yeah, the spike was because we had Atrium come in. It's not Atrium now. It's
Yeah, I
Marquee.
know, Marquette.
Marquette. They came in and we weren't planning on having them come through, and they came through and built that other building, and a lot of that fees that we collected were from them.
Okay.
As we keep going down, I just want to bring your attention to line 134, auto registration. We raised that $100,000 from $4.3 million to $4.4 million.
That's amazing.
Hmm?
It's amazing.
Just get them
That
$1,000
amount
bucks.
of money gets raised.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It hurt. Especially when I was used to 150, 200 bucks.
Yeah.
Those are the big adjustments that we made in a nutshell, from the revenues.
So, make sure I'm reading this right, interpreting this right. If I look at 9998, which is the property tax,
Yes.
is it fair for me to say that of the of the total budget that we had to have passed, which was what, last year? 20,
Hold on, I'll get that right out.
26, whatever.
Total budget was, including wastewater,
Anything that we had to put
on the appropriation was $34 million, $34,366,000.
So of that, 15,000,500 was from property tax?
Yep. Well, 15 million, yes, that's what we had to collect from property
So
taxes.
out of the total appropriations that the voters had to vote on, I just
Because
wanna
I believe that the other one does not include the veterans exemptions.
No, it does
So
not.
if you look here, you see property tax levy, that's 16,988,000 was last year.
No, 16,203 was
I'm
last year.
talking about, oh, okay, you go in the opposite direction.
Yes.
16,203,179 was last year, and 16 million, almost 17 million this year.
Okay, so it's fair to say, of the total appropriation, 16 million approximately has to come from property tax.
Correct.
That's a staggering understanding. Because when you're voting on $30 million, you're going, oh my God, and you're going through all this explanation of trying to say, no, don't worry about this amount because it's revenue neutral for whatever reason. Okay, we're having to pay 20% for a bridge, but we're getting this, but we have to count in this into the appropriation, right? So it really, in the end, it's a $30 million appropriation, but almost half of it we're getting from other places.
Right.
Right. Bonds, grants, fees.
State,
and the only
federal
thing-
monies,
And the only thing we can
capital
control.
reserve funds that we already have.
Right. And the only thing we can control is the property. The only thing we have that we can do up or down is the property
That's something we
tax.
have to emphasize, because I think it really does highlight what it is.
15 million and only being collected by approximately 10,000 homes and less than 30,000 people,
Well, in
residents,
businesses.
in
And
businesses.
Businesses. Yes. The businesses in town do pay their fair share of that tax bill,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
which,
Interesting. Thank you. Yes, Dan?
I just want to make a note, Paul, how many pool tables do we have in town? Because I just noticed we collected, there's pool table line here, it said $40. So my question was, is it $40 a table, or is there
No.
4 tables
It's
at
a-
$10 a piece?
no.
You're
curious.
you're talking about reviewing the administrative code?
No.
It costs you more to keep track of the money than what
money
you're
raised.
collecting.
That came up in the 80s, as I remember,
It did,
because
I remember.
pool starts with P, rhymes with T, and that stands for trouble. And that's why they raised that. It goes the other way.
That in the video games.
Yeah.
That in the video games.
To answer your question, Councilor Dwyer, that is one pool license. There's four pool tables up at the bowling alley. And back when this was
there.
I just
enacted,
appreciate, no, stop right there. I just appreciate that you knew the answer. Thank you, Paul.
but now that I know the answer, I got to expound.
Yeah, it's really
Back-
not use
back-
it.
Do not need to expound.
Just remember, we used to have a pool hall here in town of Merrimack. That's right. We used to have a pool hall, and that's when that was enacted. Way back when. And that was right down there by Dr. Duval.
From right here.
Right here, Merrimack
His
City.
cadence even sounds like it.
Okay, we're getting punchy again. That's the. No.
It's history, come on.
Okay, you're off.
This is history.
I'm showing my age.
You
We
had to
started
be-
early, though.
It was
We
one of
did
the
start.
more
True,
wonderful
started
town
at
meetings
6.
when we talked about the video games.
Yeah, that's well before
Those
my time.
wonderful meetings. Okay, we're all set. Any questions or comments for Eileen or Paul or Tom?
What I'd like to,
I didn't ask you. I'm only kidding. Go ahead.
now that there's no questions on the rest of the budget.
This is a wise guy.
Monday, the 30th, we'll be taking up the budget discussion for the council, deliberations from the council. So we'll be making if you have changes to the budget or discussing the budget. All the department heads will be here for if you have questions and you want to bring them up, as we have done in the past. I'll be able to keep a running total as we go forward with it. If any one of the counselors wishes to, for instance, like tonight, Chairman Harrington asked for the firefighters. If you have requests like that and you want to get the numbers ahead of time, just send your request to Eileen and we'll work out getting the numbers ahead of time so you actually have actual numbers and we're not trying to guesstimate how much hiring a person or reducing a person is going to cost all the way through. And before we start with the deliberations, we'll have the updated overtime numbers, and we'll try to have your information about how many, the expansion of homes and roads since 2010, if we can get it.
It's not going to be critical to the budget discussion. It would just add
be
to
nice.
the background to
Right,
understand.
and if we can get it, we'll definitely get it. If we can't get it by Monday night, we'll definitely have it by when we go to deliberative session.
And we're also going to be getting the garage
You're talking about the garage on Thursday?
this
This
Thursday.
Thursday,
Okay.
the 26th. You'll have a discussion about the garage,
That's right.
and we'll show you the options we have.
Right.
That actually Kyle and the architect have been bringing
I
forward.
forgot. Jackie?
Yes, I wondered if you, in a year like this, that all these building permits and going on, do you ever try to estimate the tax revenue from any new construction in any year, but particularly this year, it seems like it's very heavy.
We try to, on some of the bigger years, when the outlet mall was coming in, we tried to use that. When we knew about the PSNH substation, we tried to increase it the way we did. We actually did increase this year $20 million. We added $20 million in value, but remember we had the issue with the nonprofits, which reduced it.
Well, that'll be a whole discussion.
We can deal with that on Thursday or Monday?
Be Monday, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Non-public? Right, okay. Yeah, I'll talk to you about it. Dude, there's a question over here. Who?
Oh, I thought that's why I was pointing.
I'm getting dizzy here.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Dan Dwyer, second by
Second.
Tom Mahan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, 600.
Oh, well.